From Portland, Oregon, it's time for A Different View, with women's perspectives on the fight to end prohibition again, with Portland Dispensaries examiner and mother of four, Jennifer Alexander, and professional healthcare provider, Iva Cunningham from Alternative Medical Choices, Inc. Now, here's A Different View.
Hello, everybody, on this great Tuesday night. How is everybody doing? We've got Jennifer in here and Russ in here.
Doing great.
And somebody else.
And we got Jennifer making a bunch of noise.
We've got sound that I can't shut up.
I love it when that happens.
Just go away.
It's your mother shouting at you. Oh, we got a great show tonight. Start off with technical difficulties.
So we're going to talk a little bit tonight about the Hope Fest, which I didn't get to go to, but Russ, you were there, and so we're going to talk about that a little bit.
Yep, good time in Boise.
Back in our hometown.
It was
my
a wonderful
hometown
thing last year. I wish I could have been there this year.
You know what's nice is, it really does give you perspective. I was talking to somebody about this today, about all the whining and crying that goes on about what we don't have. And I think, wow, it's all perspective. You go someplace else, and I assure you, when you really don't have what we've got here, it sure puts things into perspective. And you get inspired because you're like, oh, the cat is out of the bag. You let me have it, now I'm not going to give it back to you.
Right.
And
for a little perspective, in the park we were in, not only at 420 could there not be marijuana smoke in the park, there's no tobacco smoking in the park.
Really?
Yeah.
They don't want
I
to be
wouldn't have
fooled.
survived last year with that.
You would have to walk out of the park.
I was going to say, though, one of the things that was a real perspective for me last year was, we go to Seattle Hemp Fest,
Right.
the hemp stock here. People walk around openly smoking their marijuana.
Uh-huh.
When we went to the Hope Fest, there was a couple of kids hiding off in the bushes off to the side and that were basically bombarded by two police officers because they had a little bit of marijuana there, and welcome to Idaho.
Well, you know what I always say, you're in a state where they don't have any sort of access to marijuana or legalization or anything like that, medical, whatever, is when you go there and you have to ask, is this one medicated? Is this one medicated? Is this one medicated? And they go, no, what?
Medicated?
Medicated?
What?
What's that? And you're like, oh, they're still newbies. And it does make you, and you kind of like, oh. But, it's funny because when they come to any of our events, they just assume that nothing is medicated. We have to no,
wait. Don't eat those brownies. Slow down.
Slow down, yes. Yeah. All right, I think that's the cue for a quick break. You're listening to A Different View. I'm Iva Cunningham. I've got Jennifer Alexander, and Russ is pushing the buttons.
We'll be right back.
Honey, our ballots came in the mail today. I can't wait to cast my vote for Measure 80.
Measure 80, is that the one to legalize marijuana? I don't know about that.
Why not? Marijuana is far safer than alcohol.
I know that, but I worry about kids smoking pot.
It's easier for kids to buy pot than beer because clerks check for proper ID.
Sure, but what about stoned drivers?
We've had medical marijuana for 14 years, and yet our traffic safety stats are better now than before medical marijuana.
Okay, but what about people coming in stoned to work?
Come on now, honey. Oregon's workplaces are safer than ever, and we have over 50,000 medical marijuana patients. Nothing about Measure 80 prevents employers from maintaining drug-free workplaces. I know change is scary, but Oregon really needs jobs and tax revenue, and Measure 80 will provide them.
Okay, safer for kids and tax revenue for our state? Makes sense to me. I'm voting yes on Measure 80.
Paid for by Oregonians for Law Reform, OregonLawReform.com.
Walt Clemens told Jimmy, right to his face, the boys may be hungry, don't you give them a taste, don't you credit my stuff. Don't credit my stuff. Bob Clemens told Jimmy, Jimmy, don't you credit my stuff.
And now we're back.
Don't
with
credit my
A Different
stuff.
View.
Who is that? Is that from...
That's music from Cedar Creek Chic. And the song is called Don't Credit My Stuff.
I like that. I like that.
You hear more stuff like that on every Monday night on the Viper Hour, 8 p.m.
Check
right
out the
here
Viper Hour. That is a great show.
on RadicalRest.com.
I love that just sort of old sound to it. I don't know how old these are. They probably really are that old. But
The scratches make them sound old.
But yeah, it's got that old nostalgic sound, like something you'd hear while hanging out at your grandma's or something,
Well, it's definitely old folk music, definitely influenced by that Hills music, that kind of sort of thing. So folklore.
Folklore?
Add to the list.
It's so early. There will be more. Stay tuned. It's funny, that Measure 80 ad that you played earlier.
Yes.
Yes, that was me. Well, it's funny because like somebody said to me the other day, "Oh, you have an Idaho accent," and I never ever. I don't know what they're talking about until I hear myself recorded, and then I think, "Oh yeah, there it is."
Yeah, I get you.
A bit of hick there, a little trailer park. No, just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Well, we're back listening to A Different View, and yes, this weekend we went to Hope Fest. It was wonderful. Like I said, whenever you go someplace where they don't have the liberties that we do or the privileges that we do. You think, gosh, you forget, and you have to like put yourself in their shoes, the paranoia that they experience. They're still overcoming a lot of their own issues. I mean, it took me a while to embrace everything.
Right.
You know, they're still trying to come to that, and so it's good to have those conversations. But like I was saying earlier before the break, of asking about whether things are medicated or not medicated. But anyway, the Idaho Hope Fest, and anybody who's listening to our show, and if you're from Utah, Nevada, wherever, surrounding state, Washington, Oregon, if you can get over to these events, you should check them out, because these people work really, really hard. It takes a lot of effort to pull these things together, and usually it's always on a shoestring budget, and
with a lot of opposition usually.
Exactly,
so
it's a lot of adversity. Last year, somebody was arrested just going into the park with a not even a real plant. It was a plastic, something that you would get from a decorette store that had like oak leaves on it. Yeah, she got arrested.
Yeah, I think that was before it, wasn't it?
Right.
I mean, it was like she was one of the organizers.
Yeah, and I can follow up on that. Her name is Teresa Knox, and she posted on her Facebook an apology because she did not make it to the Idaho Hope Fest this year because of the arrest last year. Since that last arrest, she experiences PTSD when she goes out and sees cops in public. And this year, it being the day and going out there, it was just too much, and it kept her from going.
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me because, I mean, I remember, and pardon me, Teresa, if I mess up any of the facts, because it's a year ago that I'm remembering from, but when she arrived, she said that she had gone to leave her house that morning, and she was still rushing around trying to help get everything lined up. This was their first Hope Fest last year, so
right.
This is the second one this year. And as she was backing out of her driveway, she was stopped before she had even left, and had this plastic plant in her back seat, which they harassed her over.
Oh, yeah.
It's not real.
Well, even this year, didn't you say there were people in the bushes that were taking pictures?
In the case of Carrie and Kenny, your cell phones die, and usually when we go on the road, the only cell phone charger you got is the one in the car that you plug into the little cigarette lighter. So they're parked along the edge there, walk over to the passenger side door and open up the door, to plug in the phone. They plug in the phone while it's charging, and they're hanging out there and trying to read or send mails or whatever. And Carrie looks over Kenny's shoulder and sees an undercover cop from behind a bush poke over with a camera with a big lens to take a picture of them charging their cell phones.
Like a squirrel.
And I got to tell you, I was pretty impressed last year. I talked to a lot of the officers there. You know me. Talked to a lot of the officers there. And repeatedly, they told me there was no problem with Oregon marijuana coming into Idaho. Over and over again, told me this. And then,
now it's a big problem.
And then it was like 3-4 months later, suddenly I'm seeing these big media splashes. All the Idaho arrests are Oregon medical marijuana. Well, that's a change. It seems like we were you guys are from Idaho. We were like an hour over the border, if even. Yeah. I mean, if it was going anywhere, it was going there. These were the local officers saying, no, we don't have a problem with this.
Yeah.
And suddenly now there's this huge problem with.
They've definitely been told not to speak this time because Carrie went to speak to them, and when she did, they gave total stonewalling. She tried to, and Carrie is the most open person as far as talking to someone. And so if Oregon and Washington pass legalization, do you think you're going to do anything different here in Idaho? These officers will do what they're instructed to do. Well, yeah, would there be inspections at the border or something? These officers will do what they're instructed to do. Literally like RoboCop.
Who's instructing you?
Well, what's interesting, you should say that. It's interesting that they have, they don't want to say anything. Their demeanor last year was friendly and they were open. This year, it's more intimidating.
Yeah.
I will say there was one last year that
wanted
was
to make
full on intimidating. One of the little 10-speed guys, he had
cops on bikes.
He had this just angry look. He was standing there with there was 4 of them when I approached, and he was one of the 4. The other 4 kind of all looked to him when I approached them, so I presume he might have been a supervisor,
probably.
So they all kept their mouths zipped and didn't say a word, and he was very. he didn't say anything bad about marijuana, but he was very clear that he did not wish to engage in this conversation and was only there to do a job.
Right.
That.
Well, speaking of Carrie, we do have video from her speech.
Yeah, yes. Let's play that.
Idaho
Let's
Hope
play
Fest. Now, you do have to
long.
kind of know a little bit of the setup here. Is it was very last second on the PA, so the stage there was just this tiny little stage. You had to stand on the grass in front of the stage to actually speak while they were putting stuff on the stage behind you for the bands. And there was this one gentleman there, and that's stretching the term gentleman, because he was, Carrie called him a heckler, but hecklers are usually against you. This person was absolutely for legalization, but was acting as if she and he were just having a conversation, the two of them.
He was on the soapbox.
I've seen people do that.
He was standing on the soapbox too. There's a very good way to put it.
He had something to contribute to the conversation.
Exactly. Now, this is, Carrie's pretty new to public speaking. She's only done it a couple of years and done a few events. And
she does a good job. I don't know.
She handled this so well. I mean, she complained because she thought her speech was lousy because of this guy, and he totally rattled her. No way. Wait till you see this.
Everyone is their own worst critic except for you, Russ.
Wait till you see this. It's so good. This is Carrie Gallagher at the Idaho Hope Fest. Let me get this running right there.
And keep motivating and inspiring young activists in your state.
Every year.
I wanted to take.
Kids have their licenses. It's so easy.
All right,
I wanted to take a few minutes of my time here and talk about activism, because it's a word that I've heard kind of thrown around a little bit. And I think that everybody that showed up here today can consider themselves an activist in the state of Idaho. So thank you so much for coming out. Someone has told me, how do you get started in activism? And this is some advice I have for you, people that are interested in changing the world, because this is how it happens. People get motivated to change our laws. They say our elected officials are not doing enough to help us. In a lot of states, like the great state of Idaho, we have a citizens ballot initiative. That means if you want to write a law, you can write your own law and you can put it on the ballot and you can have the voters decide. You don't have to wait for the legislators here. Now that's a simplified version of it. I mean, it really does take thousands and thousands of hours, of volunteer hours, of paid hours, of legal advice. There's signature gatherers. There's a long process that has to happen. And of course, it takes an awful lot of money. Oregon recently has had some success with getting a measure on the ballot and only spending about $450,000. I don't have $500,000, and I know a lot of people don't have $500,000 in here. If you do, please come and see me. I've got some great organizations that would love to talk to you. But until then, I'm going to go back to activism. This is what I tell people to start. This week, I'd like you to go and call your mom, if you are lucky enough to have her still walking on this planet. If not, call your favorite aunt, call your grandma. And this is what I want you to say. I want you to say, Mom, I use marijuana, and I think it's a safer choice than alcohol or tobacco. Do you still love me? It doesn't matter even what she says. You have changed the world. You have broadened the horizon for some people. Now you just need to go out the door, and you just need to keep on doing that. To be a good activist, you need to be a good citizen. I want you to recycle. I want you to respect your neighbors. I want you to help people when you can. I want you to give to donations to charities that you believe in. Of course, I want you to vote. I need you to register. I need you to vote. I want you to be the best person you can be. I want you to be as nice as you can be. I want you to make it impossible for people to not like you. I want you to make it impossible for people to not love you. And then I want you to tell everyone that you feel comfortable with that you think it's time to end marijuana prohibition. And that's how we can change the minds and the hearts of those people that don't use cannabis. I don't use alcohol. I have no problem with going and cheering on Boise State and having alcohol there. I have no problem with the wonderful bars that are in this town and the great live music. And I would support your right to continue to consume alcohol if that's what you choose to do as an adult. But I also would like for the adults in this community, in this state, in this country, to be able to choose something else that is proven to be safer, that is proven to be a medical treatment in some cases. And it is time to end prohibition. Now, you don't have the choice to vote on prohibition this November. You don't, but you can help us legalize marijuana in the entire country, and I'm going to tell you how you can do that this November. 3 states, people, 3 states have done the hard work, spent the money, spent the thousands and thousands of hours it takes to get an initiative on the ballot. 3 states. 2 of those states you share 720 miles of border with. Washington is legalizing. They're voting to legalize for adults in their state. I-502. Oregon is voting to legalize for all adults. Measure 80. Colorado is voting to legalize marijuana by a constitutional amendment to their state constitution. That's Amendment 64. What I need you to do is go to your Facebook accounts if you have Facebook. If you're not into that, I want you to make a list of all the people that you know that live in the states of Washington, of Oregon, of Colorado. Maybe it's someone you used to work with. Maybe it's a relative, an old friend, someone you went to high school with. Call them up and you tell them, I need you to vote for me and 50 of my Idaho friends. You need to pass this legislation. The strongest message we can give to the federal government, 3 states up, 3 states legal. That's how we get it changed. That's how we change alcohol prohibition. That's how this is going to go down. So we need your help. All those campaigns need money. Some of them have volunteer things that you can do from your state, like call banks. I have some information on all 3 of those initiatives. If you want to come find me, I would love to get you that information. But we do need to send this message to the federal government, because the time of putting people in a cage for a plant is over. It's ridiculous. We cannot do that anymore. And we know that being behind bars might not be the worst thing that happens if you get arrested for a little bit of pot. If you have a drug conviction, that's on your employment information. That's in any custody hearings. They can use that against you in housing. There's a lot of ways you can be discriminated against. One of the most abhorrent things is taking away a student's financial aid for a drug conviction. That has to stop. We have to end prohibition to end the discrimination against cannabis consumers. And I need your help. So please do what you can. Get involved. Please support the states. Washington, I-502. Oregon, Measure 80. Colorado, Amendment 64. All 3 of these need to pass because we have to send a message to Washington. We are not putting up with this anymore. So please join me. My name's Carrie Gallagher. I have lots of friends on Facebook. You can find me there. If you like Twitter, you can find me at Cannabis Carrie on Twitter. That's where I really let my hair down. And I'm also the news director for the Russ Belville Show, radicalruss.com. We're on there Monday through Friday giving you information to the cannabis community about laws, about legislation, so that's another way that you can get tapped in. But most and foremost, I just want to say thank you for coming. Please, if you can, $1, $5, $20 in these buckets, and let's keep this festival going. Thank you, everyone.
There you go. That is some major league heckling.
That is grace under fire.
I was going to say what I said while we were watching that video for our viewers. Carrie just became a veteran public speaker.
Yes, she
Professional
did.
speakers don't do that well with hecklers.
She earned her wings. She did handle it the best way she can. It's like, okay, I gave you a moment. Now I'm just going to talk over you. Is there nothing else that you can say that's important?
The number one thing you can remember is that you have the microphone.
Right.
You are amplified.
Yes. He will die. I will not die, but he will disappear.
Now, when you get to the next level, you learn how to turn those guys off.
You know, the only thing that we'll talk about it a little bit later.
Let's take a break and we'll come back.
Okay.
You're listening to A Different View.
As I call upon the force of this Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie is the Almighty.
Hi, this is Dan Michaels. If you're looking for professional voice talent for your commercial or podcast, I'm your man. Visit danmichaelsaudio.com for more information.
Now we're back with A Different View.
Welcome back. You're listening to A Different View. I'm Jennifer here with Iva.
I was trying to multitask. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about prohibition in the next segment. But just really quick to touch on, in this segment, Carrie had mentioned it in her speech about how the states or how alcohol prohibition was repealed, and that's so true. And I think that a lot of people don't realize how crucial that was. We're not taught that in school. You sit back, they tell you, well, we passed the 18th Amendment, which, you know, outlawed alcohol, and then later on we figured out that didn't work so well, so we repealed it with the 21st Amendment. They don't tell you everything that happened in between there.
They don't talk about the violence. I mean, they talk about it the glory days in a way. I mean, no, seriously. I mean, I do see a lot of glorifying those gangsters. I mean, Boardwalk Empire.
There's a lot of shows.
Yes,
right.
And even then, people talked about them in a way, gangsters. That was
alcohol was always socially acceptable. Actually, I was doing some research for an article that I wrote about the end of Prohibition, the end of Prohibition. Yeah, it happened now. No, the start of Prohibition with the Marijuana Tax Act. I was writing an article on it, doing some research for it, and one of the things that I found was that when it was enacted, something that was largely thought of as a gentleman's thing, getting drunk, going to these I forget what they were called, but the speakeasies or whatever you want to call them, instead became almost a family activity, and not in a good way. Now you've got these little children hanging out in your saloons, and women are in there. Women were never a part of that scene prior to.
Right.
But suddenly it's illegal, and you've got kids and women popping out of the woodwork to come drink with the men.
Well, the attitude was, it was kind of nice to do something naughty and break the law and be a little bit, risque.
Well, and how can the adults, or even like in the case back then, women and men, kind of a little different than today, but I mean, how could anybody hold anybody else accountable? If you're bumping into them at the saloon, you're both in violation. It's not like you can be like, you shouldn't be here.
I won't tell. You don't tell. Well, we have a little bit of that in our own community, but today is it today? That was
yesterday.
Yesterday. Sorry. See, I don't even keep up on birthdays. But.
Well, I was going to say, let's talk a little bit about the opposition to Measure 80, and then talk about the birthday, because one of the things that I wanted to mention was that with that Portland City Club, which we talked a little bit about last week.
Yes.
One of the many things that Josh Markey said that kind of blew my mind was he tried to say that alcohol prohibition was when we tried to completely get rid of alcohol. And he tried to say that that's not what we're doing with marijuana. And the exact opposite is true. With alcohol, some alcohol was always legal. You could get it medically.
Right.
And the Volstead Act allowed anything with 0.5% alcohol or less. It was still legal.
That's why they watered it down.
So the reality there is that alcohol was never completely prohibited like marijuana is.
Well, that's
was allowed for religious purposes as well.
I was going to say, we're not allowed to have 0.0001% marijuana. We're not. Not that we'd be okay with that. But we're not even allowed that.
Yeah, that's not a privilege that you have, even with your medical marijuana card.
Alcohol prohibition also, Volstead Act had to do with the importation, transportation, or sales of intoxicating liquors. Possession was never a problem.
Right. And it is that exact irony that really relates to our current conversation, because both sides of the argument, openly acknowledge that prohibition of alcohol absolutely failed. We had rampant crime.
I think that a lot of them still would agree today. I mean, I even heard Kevin Sabat say that prohibition isn't working. I hear it over and over again from our opponents, but then in the same breath they'll say, yeah, but legalization's not the answer.
And the reason is because they cannot relate what we did with alcohol to what we're doing with marijuana. To them, they're total blinders when they're looking at this issue. And alcohol prohibition wasn't nearly as bad as marijuana prohibition. That's the reality that we're dealing with now. We have even more criminal gangs, more widespread. I mean, Al Capone is like this historical figure because of everything that happened during the we have people today that you don't even know their names of that are worse. I mean, they're not making history because there's so many of them.
No, yeah.
Realistically, I mean, how many people in Mexico are cutting off heads over marijuana?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know any of their names. Do you?
Yeah. How many innocent bystanders? We were just watching.
I know one name, Chapo Guzman, and that's because he made the Forbes billionaire list. That's what you got to do to stand out now.
Nice.
Wow.
Chop off some heads and earn some millions.
That's frightening.
No, it really is. But it's kind of telling of the society that we live in that
I
these
never
things
understood.
aren't as shocking as they were back then.
I never understood why we vilified Mexico so badly, and why we don't try to do more to help that country, because it is in our best interest to try to find solutions to these problems, and that problem would be easy if we legalized marijuana. I mean, because don't they have personal use of other drugs too?
Maybe I'm being cynical, but I would say that the people that are making those decisions don't believe it is in our best interest. They're getting cheap labor and lots of jobs in the criminal justice system by keeping the status quo.
I know that part, but I mean, I would think that just as Americans in general, why we don't, why isn't there a loud outcry for, like, what are we doing to this country?
Distracted.
We've become, it's become our toilet. I mean, it really has become our toilet. To be really crass, Mexico's become our toilet, and it's disgusting how we have gone in there and trashed that country, and slaughtered lots of people because of our policies. And I don't. It drives me crazy that we want to continue to vilify, citizens of Mexico for wanting to come here and climb their way out of our toilet.
Right. Well, and I think. This would be like a whole can of worms, but I think that so many people look again at a very narrow perspective of people coming from Mexico or other Latin American countries that are fairly impoverished, coming to America and growing marijuana as a means to cover their cost of coming in or in helping their family back home, or all of these different things. And we look at them as these criminal elements invading our society, when in reality, they're entrepreneurs doing what everybody in America did, going where there's a market and fulfilling it in order to live, you know?
Yeah.
But that's not the way our society paints that picture. They're invading our country, underhanded, destroying our children, bringing the devil weed. And and it is the reefer madness story that we heard.
It's just morphed into something else.
Not really. It's the same story.
No, I mean, it's just morphed into a different label, is what I'm saying. It's the same behavior, just labeled differently.
Right.
I sometimes Russ will land on, is it Universal? Is that how you pronounce it?
Univision?
Yeah.
Azteca America?
Yeah, and
Telemundo?
There's a lot of them.
And they're really graphic.
TV.
And they're really, like the dog whisper, and they're really graphic, unlike our news. And you always know it's somebody that's gotten an innocent bystander in a gang war.
Narco-guerra. Drug war.
Yeah,
Narco-guerra is the term you hear all the time.
And you see it so often. It's just I don't know how come.
Well, and here's kind of the thing that really frustrates me is that
I don't get why we don't intervene. I just don't. I don't get it.
Well, and it's not even just intervene. It's quit fueling the problem. It's
right.
like we
why
pour
are we allowing
gasoline
it to
on
happen?
it.
Yeah. No, I know. It's become our toilet. And we just, that's where we put our shit, and then we.
So one of the arguments that's come out for Measure 80 a lot, which it makes me laugh every time I hear it, is drug dealers won't allow themselves to be regulated, or what industry will allow regulation. Of course they're going to fight against it. There's still going to be black market and everything. And
trade.
I don't think any industry allows itself to be regulated. I think consumers demand regulation. I think consumers choose to buy regulated and or unregulated part. I think ultimately consumers are the ones in control. We have a demand in the United States for marijuana. If there's no lawful way to get it, we're going to pursue other ways of getting it. That demand does not change based on the law. But if they had lawful outlets, they could grow it themselves. They could buy it at the corner, cannabis store.
Or I could go to my Sunday market.
Why in the hell is that person going to go hunt out a narco, to cartel guy that's invading our national forest to grow his semi-good quality weed that's been grown under a pine tree?
Why take a huge?
Why would we do this?
Right. It doesn't make sense. Why would we take a huge risk, our life and limb and everything else, just to get something that, when I would rather go get a safe, tested, quality tested, product from a place that I know is, mostly secure. I don't have a problem walking into a state regulated liquor store, but, I do have a problem waiting in a dark parking lot.
And now the other side of that is that the opponents want to say, well, you're ignoring the fact that, of course, people are going to, sell it on the black market, blah, blah, blah. They, of course this is still going to exist. Even if it's not those guys, it's going to be the kids.
Not if there's no money in it.
Well, no, that's just it. We're all sitting around watching a football game on Sunday. We might all chip in $5. One of us runs down to the corner liquor store, gets some beer, comes back, and delivers it to the other two people who chipped in.
Yeah.
If that was marijuana, you're a drug dealer.
Yeah.
That's black market. And that's the reality. Yes, people are going to chip in and buy a bag together. Yes, people are going to buy a bag, and instead of their buddy having to run down to the corner, he's going to be like, oh, I'll just sell you my half and go get more later.
Because that's
that will
called a party.
happen. That's just human nature. But it's not the same thing as the drug cartels or whatever coming into our forest, destroying our lands, and all of these things that we actually are concerned about.
Right.
Nobody cares that you're selling your half of the six-pack to the guy sitting next to you watching the football game. Nobody's going to care in the other situation either.
Right.
Let's not paint it into something it isn't.
Right. All right, there's our cue for break. Restaurants and music loud. All right, we're going to take a break. You're listening to A Different View. I'm Iva Cunningham with Jennifer Alexander.
Tell me lies, you give me pie. She hold me close, you hold me tight.
What's happening, cool cats? This is Big Daddy, and I want you to cruise on over to the Funky Roller Rink. We'll be grooving all night long. Doors open at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, every Thursday night, right here on RadicalRuss.com.
Funky-licious.
Now we're back with A Different View.
Welcome back. You're listening to A Different View. I'm Jennifer, here with Iva. Hello. And so we kind of merged these two segments together, so I'm just going to flow with it. We're going to continue to merge them together.
Okay.
Talking about the history of prohibition in the marijuana community, which on October 1st, 1937, the Marijuana Tax Stamp Act was passed. And what that was is it basically required that anybody who possessed marijuana must have a stamp, much like we have for cigarettes. If you flip the cigarette packs over, there's a little stamp on there that says, yes, I've paid the tax on this product. The problem with the Marijuana Tax Stamp Act is that if you didn't have the stamp, you were subject to prosecution.
Right.
And in order to get the stamp, you had to first incriminate yourself as possessing illegal cannabis. So it was found to be illegal many years later by Dr. Timothy Leary, 69, I believe it was. But back then, this was the first instance of marijuana prohibition nationwide. Various states had sort of tackled the issue here and there. And this is where I want to kind of bounce back to the alcohol prohibition portion of it. A lot of people say, we can't legalize marijuana. The feds won't let us. That is not the way history has ever played out. That's not the way alcohol prohibition, both implementing prohibition and repealing prohibition, took place. And so Paul Stanford mentioned this in the City Club debate, and I was only mildly aware of it. So I just did a little bit of research and kind of shocked by what I found, because Oregonians must have very short memories.
I think everyone does.
In November of 1932, almost a full 6 months before alcohol prohibition was put into place by our federal government with the 18th Amendment to the Constitution, Oregon, or repealed, sorry.
Wait, repealed.
Repealed, that's what I'm trying to say, sorry. Repealed. Almost 6 months before it was repealed nationwide, Oregon repealed it. In Oregon.
Right.
It was a bill to repeal state prohibition law of Oregon. It was Measure 7, 1932, on the general election. 206,000 people voted for repealing alcohol prohibition. 138,000 voted against. That was in Oregon before the federal government had repealed it. Now, the same people that are jumping up and down today saying, we can't repeal marijuana prohibition, we can't pass Measure 80, we can't pass Measure I-502 in Washington or 64 in Colorado, don't seem to realize that that is exactly how we do it. That's the way history has demonstrated time and time again that we do it.
Right.
It's at the state level. The states, then when enough states have shown either the desire or the actual fact of changing the law, then the federal government will consider changing it.
But we nearly had that before during Carter's
well, that was at a federal level. That was Carter calling for decriminalization in '77. That wasn't a state.
Well, and that shows how.
Right, but didn't we have multiple states that were legal?
It was riding the wave of decriminalized states that Normal started with Oregon in '73. That led to 11 states decriminalizing between '73 and '79. So
decriminalizing,
that seemed
not
like
legalizing.
A big wave, yes.
Yeah.
But that being a huge change, and I guess that's the other thing that's sort of funny about all of these terminologies, because people largely don't understand the difference. Decriminalization just means civil penalties. It does not mean that it's okay now.
Right.
And it's usually only on possession, not on cultivation. So it's okay for you to have marijuana, but God forbid somebody provide it to you.
Right.
You know, because they're a big criminal. The legalization takes into account that there's an actual market here. Now, what we do with that market varies by what bill we implement, but we acknowledge the market, not just the possession.
Right.
But with Oregon, once we had repealed our state laws, then federally we saw that, you know, the 18th Amendment was repealed with the 21st Amendment. Then in Oregon, we implemented the Oregon Liquor Control Commission just a couple of months after it was repealed nationally. I think there's different people that have different arguments for how we should do it in Oregon. I think that Measure 80 is a wonderful wonderful solution. Worst case scenario, the federal government says, no, you can't have this commercial market. Okay, we still don't have criminal penalties in Oregon against marijuana. I'm okay with that.
Right.
Best case scenario, we have a full plan already to deal with that market instead of just a wide open, who knows how it's going to go.
Roll the dice to see what happens.
Right. And I think that's comprehensive. I think it's a good idea. The idea, going back to that drug dealers won't be regulated, though, that I think is the biggest thing, is that nobody wants to attack the actual idea of regulation that we're proposing. They just want to say we're all bad people to start with, so it won't matter what law we put into place. We're not going to do it anyway.
Right.
We spent $500,000 to put a law out there that we're all going to ignore, you know?
Well, it's interesting when people talk about, ending prohibition. I think there's still too many opinions about what that means within our own community. And I think that there's people who think it's, they want more medical, they want to expand medical, and they still want to keep it, very, very limited to personal use, and so you still have to go to a certain place. You can't grow it, you can't, you know what I mean? And then I think that there's the people that's, it's all or nothing.
Right.
And, I think that the measures that we have, even OCTA is the most liberal of all of them, but the measures 502 in Washington and then 64 in Colorado, I think are most people in the community would agree that they are conservative, but I think they're the most likely to win.
Yeah.
Because it's going to have to happen in stages, because we've spent a long, long time, scaring the public. We spent a lot of, prohibition has been, against marijuana is what, 75 years?
75 yesterday.
70, see,
remember? Happy birthday, Prohibition. Now die.
It wasn't
that
a date on
Vivian
that.
McPeak. I love it.
I know, somebody should tweet that. That's like a Gandhi quote. But anyway, crap, Jennifer, now I think, I think that
you were talking about how we've scared the public
yes,
so
we've
badly.
done a good job scaring the public for a very long time. And even, like you were talking last week, how you were astonished that somebody was afraid of the actual plant.
Right.
Like it was going to jump out and bite you. And I think, I'm not surprised by that. I'm truly not surprised by that. I think there are people who have a lot of beliefs that are far from the truth or reality, but we've done a long time. So we have to not only ending prohibition for, when we talk about marijuana, is we have to overcome the subculture that people don't like. We also have to overcome the opinions that are not based in reality.
Right.
And then we have to share with people why they should want it to end. You know, why should we continue to let Mexico go to wasteland? Why should we continue to let kids have such access to it? You know, so we have a long ways to go to get it legal, but I do think the conservative approach is probably more likely to end marijuana prohibition than
I think
else.
that people will be surprised at what the public does support. I think that my experience is that while the conservative approach will probably pass with a wider margin, I think most people in the general population want marijuana prohibition to end any way they can get it. And that's not just the stoners. I mean, I hear people all the time say, I don't even smoke pot, but I'm sick of wasting all our money on this. Or, you know, and
they've got that message loud and clear, and we've done a really good job of pointing that out. Look, this is a waste of our money and our time when we have
civil rights.
Civil rights.
I mean, there's other
crimes that are going unsolved because we are wasting so much time and resources, and it's just shooting fish in a barrel. Can we move on to something?
Does it seem like even our opponents, when we argue against them, are saying, yeah, the drug war sucks, but this isn't the way to fix it?
That is exactly what they're saying. And actually, I've quoted that
Without
a few
a
times to
solution.
people because I think what a lot of people in our community aren't understanding is our opposition is saying exactly that. Prohibition has failed, but and that's how we've already won. We've just got to get them to acknowledge it.
Oh, I thought sorry.
Hi, Iva.
No, I was listening. I thought somebody was coming downstairs. Sorry.
But no, I mean, I've heard it too many times. Even District Attorney Josh Markey, at the Portland City Club, I was astonished when I heard him say, the federal laws are draconian. I was like, isn't that our word?
Well, I know. It's funny because, they say, oh yeah, it's really bad. It hasn't worked. It hasn't, but nobody gets locked up for it. So then why do you care? Why do you care that law is still in the books? I mean, if you're not going to enforce it and nobody enforces it, as you say, then why do you care if we just end it, take it off the books? Isn't it cluttering up the books? I'm just saying. I mean, one less law that the cops have to deal with. One less thing for them to deal with, and they can go after the rapists, the murderers, and the child molesters, and the dog kickers, and not have to deal with a bunch of paperwork related to potheads.
Well, and one of the things that I found interesting, I thought I brought it with me, but I must not have. But there was a impact statement for Measure 80 that was put out recently. And in that impact statement, they basically addressed the financial effects, the costs, the benefits. And so one of the people that participated in the committee to define what these costs were and announced to the press today or yesterday, basically, that while he participated in forming that whole process, that he forgot or failed to mention that there'd be no limits, and he wanted to make sure everybody knew that there'd be no limits in Measure 80. And since that came out, I mean, first off, a few people have pointed out just how funny it is for somebody who was on a professional committee supposed to be in charge of telling the public these important things, and now he's jumping up and down saying, wait, I forgot. That doesn't make me feel very confident in his competence in fulfilling the duties put before him.
Well,
You've lost a little credibility
with
there.
that.
But he did get the media attention that he wanted, because now, of course, everybody's putting out there using the credibility of his position. He's also a district attorney in Southern Oregon.
Okay.
That this horror, there'll be no limits. And a lot of people are like, oh, am I prohibited from buying too many 6-packs? Like, is there a limit that I wasn't aware of?
You can kill yourself on alcohol.
Or how much you can make yourself. And actually, there are some limits, but it's ridiculous limits that most people couldn't. 200
gallons a year.
And then how much for wine? Isn't it
of
even
homebrew?
more?
200 gallons?
Yeah, 200 gallons per year. Isn't it per adult, too? Like, if you've got, like, the
Holy
two of you,
crap.
400 gallons.
Yeah.
Woo!
And we're worried about 1.5 pounds of marijuana.
Wow.
I mean, it's just funny that people
Although
the opposition has this whole framework that only fits marijuana, nothing else in your life.
That's a really good comparison. I really think that's a good comparison. 200 gallons per person in a 12-month calendar year, and I can't have a pound of pot.
Right. Oh, you can't have an ounce of pot.
I know. But I mean, I should...
Well, we're about due to go to break. I'm Jennifer here with Iva. You're listening to A Different View. Check us out on Facebook at A Different View 420, on Twitter at ADV 420, or if you have any thoughts, comments, or story ideas, you can email us at adifferentview420@gmail.com.
I think Facebook is the best.
One early dawn, now Noah jived all the animals into that old ark. Ain't no telling what Adam told Eve in the dark. Do you dig my jive? Solid, Jack. Do you dig my jive? Hello, Mac.
I'm Sub Cool from Team Green Avenger. At TGAgenetics.com, we are working on the leading edge of medical strains. Our strains are rigorously tested for THC, CBD, THCV, and other critical cannabinoids. Know your grow. Check out our genetic diversity at TGAgenetics.com, the home of Jelly Bean, Jack the Ripper, Vortex, and other award-winning cannabis strains.
Back with A Different View.
Welcome back. You're listening to A Different View. I'm Jennifer, here with Iva. Mm-hmm. So
I'm ready for this next segment, Jennifer.
I know.
I got my opinion hat
posted. I posted this to Facebook last night, and I actually posted like this long rant, and then I deleted the whole thing because I was like, I am not getting all of my points out there. I'm like all over the place. I'm like, I'm just going to save it for our show tonight.
Sometimes you just have to do that.
This is from the Seattle Times. It was published yesterday. It's an op-ed from Robert DuPont, who was the first drug czar. Is that right? I think he was the first. He was like one of the longest. DuPont is a well-known name in marijuana prohibition. and Andrea Barthwell, and I believe both of these people are part of the group Save Our Society, whose ultimate goal is basically just to eradicate marijuana from the minds and bodies of everybody everywhere to save our society. Specifically marijuana. They don't focus on any other substances of abuse with any clarity. They may passingly mention them, you know what I mean? But they're not focused on it. It's just marijuana. But it's Don't Legalize Marijuana, It's Addictive. This is the title. And I'm just going to read it because it's not very long, and I couldn't summarize it any better. It's many baby boomers and their children still believe the folklore of the 1960s and 70s that marijuana can't be addictive because it's just an herb. But several decades of research clearly show that what we believed 40 years ago is wrong. Marijuana addiction is common. About 9% of people who smoke marijuana even once become addicted to it. And that figure approximately doubles when people begin using the drug as adolescents. To prevent addiction from spreading, Washington voters should not legalize marijuana and reject Initiative 502 on the November 6th ballot.
Wow.
Marijuana addiction statistics are similar to the percentage of people who become alcoholics. Rates of marijuana dependence rise to 20 to 30% when people use it at least 5 times, and 35 to 40% for those who use marijuana daily. Marijuana dependence is the most common type of drug dependence in the United States, besides alcohol and tobacco. As doctors who have practiced addiction medicine for decades, we're seeing unprecedented levels of marijuana addiction today. Treatment admissions for marijuana use disorders have dramatically increased, accounting for 18% of admissions in 2010, higher than for heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, and prescription painkillers. We attribute attribute rising marijuana addiction to increases in use and the astounding rise in marijuana potency, more than 760% higher than the 1960s. The neurobiology of marijuana dependence is well understood through recent research, but the symptoms of marijuana dependence are the most convincing evidence. The main indicators of dependence are withdrawal symptoms, unsuccessful attempts to control use, increased tolerance, and using larger amounts of the drug or for a longer time than intended. All of these have been measured in people with marijuana dependence. Laboratory studies of brain responses reveal neurochemical changes from marijuana withdrawal, similar to other dependence-producing drugs. Upon abstinence, daily marijuana smokers experience withdrawal symptoms, including anxiety, depression, irritability, restlessness, sleep difficulty, strange dreams, anger, and aggression, the same symptoms experienced when people stop using heroin and cocaine.
Do we turn green?
The American Society of Addiction Medicine recently issued a white paper outlining our position against marijuana legalization. Our principal objection is that legalization will increase the disease of addiction. We must oppose a massive social experiment that would increase the disease we strive each day to reduce. And it goes on a little bit further, but you definitely get the general idea. Now,
drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs. If you do them, you're bad. Because drugs are bad, okay?
Okay. Just for a little background, Robert DuPont, he's an MD, national leader in drug abuse prevention, policy, and treatment. And he was the first director of the National Institute of on drug abuse from 73 to 78.
Yeah, not first drug czar, first NIDA.
Right. And and NIDA is the one that denies all the research money to those.
NIDA was quoted, my former colleague Paul Armentano, working at Normal, New York Times reported on speaking to NIDA about why they weren't greenlighting some positive research on cannabis, and they said, as our job in the National Institutes of Drug Abuse is not to highlight the positives of marijuana, we are here to combat drug abuse.
Well, and that's actually let me throw this question out there and just tell me if I'm mistaken, because when I read through this, and like I said, there was only a little bit more, but it was the exact same thing continued on. What about that? What is prohibition doing to fix any of that? Like,
right. Well,
there's nothing in there that indicates
argument.
that legalization is the problem or that prohibition is the solution.
The issue here is that fear has worked for many, many decades, and it's worked very well. When I hear that, as you've read it, it's fear-based. We don't want the people getting addicted. Oh my God, it's like crack cocaine,
But what if it is? Prohibition's not solving it. What if it's worse than crack cocaine? What if the first time you smoke a joint, your brain shrivels up into a prune and you keel over dead? Prohibition isn't stopping people from smoking
policy
it.
and treatment. He's all about getting those drug courts. He's all about getting those programs in place. That's what he does.
Right. But I'm talking about from the outside perspective. What he's just said. If I'm not a proponent for marijuana, if I'm not looking for, I'm not looking for the more biased in our favor arguments, nothing that he said still illustrates any reason why we shouldn't legalize. We could legalize marijuana, and maybe I could still be like, we have a drug abuse problem. We need to do this, and this to solve it. Legalizing marijuana doesn't mean that we're going to hand out free samples to everybody.
But his job isn't to endorse, legalizing drugs. That's his job is the opposite of that. So, I'm not surprised. I always say, watch the DuPonts. And when people go, why is marijuana illegal? And I'm like, well, there's a lot of money in these treatment programs. There's a ton of money preventing and in our judicial system. There's a lot of money wrapped up there, a lot of jobs, a lot of livelihoods on the chopping blocks here. If we legalize marijuana, it is in their best interest to come out with zero taxes, to do whatever they want. And to me, I look at it as an encouraging sign. We are making progress.
Yeah.
People, it's becoming an issue that is worth discussing. I don't think that Obama is going to have that same opportunity, although he may not give a shit this round because he doesn't have to. But I don't think that he can really ignore it anymore. I think that it's going, we've changed elections. I think that this is just another demonstration of we are making noise and we are making people uncomfortable because we want to have this discussion and we won't shut up about it. That's what I think that is. That's an answer to us to say, oh, shh, shh, shh. Because there's a real chance that 502 could pass. And I expect more stuff like that.
Well, and I think, though, and while this is strictly
and they'll never answer the question of why prohibition should remain in place.
No, definitely not. That's not the conversation they want to have. Then we would have an honest debate.
Because it works for them. It works for them. That's why. They don't want it to end because it works for them.
In Washington, it's very controversial, that Allison Holcomb pretty much portrays that they're not a pro-pot petition, that they're not trying to reach out to the stoner population and make them happy. They're trying to pass something that the average voter will support.
Right.
I think that strategy, whether or not you agree with the legislation that was the outcome of that strategy, is clearly the right answer. Because, when we've got even opponents to legalizing marijuana saying prohibition has failed, the drug war has failed, that we need to change federal policies, we need to reschedule it to Schedule 2, just like cocaine. I disagree with that. I'd like it to come down a little further.
I want it descheduled.
But it shows that there is consensus across the board that what we're doing now isn't working.
Right, and I think that the general public is willing to give us room to test the waters for a little bit more progressive laws. All right, we're going to take a break.
No, we're going to wrap up the show. This is the end.
I was looking
it went so quick. No,
oh my goodness.
Look at the clock, honey.
Holy crap. I was like, don't we have another half hour? Shoot. I was having so much fun.
Yeah, we'll be back next Tuesday, though, at 8 p.m. for the live show at radicalruss.com.
And if you want to hear our silliness, we repeat what days we're at.
The show repeats at 3 in the morning.
3 in the morning.
And at 9 in the morning.
Every day.
And next week on Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Cool. Yes. All right. Well, you're listening to A Different View. We'll be back next week at Tuesday at the same time, same bat channel, radicalruss.com. And for other great shows, check out radicalruss.com. Lots of really great stuff happening there.
And really good stuff coming up for the future that we can't talk about yet, but you'll be so glad you've been listening. Woo-hoo. And want to thank everybody involved with the shows here, Jennifer Alexander and Iva Cunningham. A Different View 420 on YouTube, A Different View 420 on Facebook, also ADV 420 on Twitter, and you can find everything you need on A Different View. Plus, ladies, the blog template's ready to go. Before you leave, we'll show you how to log in and start creating posts.
Woo.
That'll be some good stuff. I also just wanted to talk here because you wrap up when there's still like 2.5 minutes left in the show.
I thought we still had some time to do give it to the man.
You're allowed to do that.
Give it
Go
to
ahead.
the man.
Give it to the man. You got 90 seconds.
Mr. Man.
Mr. Man. I cordially ask you to end this prohibition. Die now.
Happy birthday, Prohibition. Now fucking die. I love that. That's great.
Man, when they take all your liquor, let's see where you stand on the road.
I just love that part.
So do I. It's my favorite part. I quit drinking years ago when Damon quit drinking, and I love that.
Speaking of drinking, I did a little of that when I'm around my family, and I have to tell you that riding a bicycle is not easy to do when you've had a drink or two.
Drunk biking.
Yes, that's why I recommend marijuana.
I
know, I was like, that's why I recommend marijuana. I won't crash my bike and hit my cranium.
Different view.
An amazing day.
Long, long road. It's a long, long, long road. It's a long